Sellers Manufacturing makes a unique design of boiler. You may not be familiar with the front and rear doors, so let me show you how to safely open the rear door and front door of a Sellers Manufacturing S-Series boiler. Here we have a smaller boiler. This rectangle in the back is called a blast door. This door is hinged so that it can open. The rectangle is not held by anything other than gravity and the weight of it, and it rests against a gasket on the underside. You will need to change the gasket every couple years when the gasket gets wore out or you have sealing issues against the blast door. Let me show you how to change that gasket. First, we're going to take off the pins that secure the blast door to this rod and we're going to lift it down. On larger Sellers Manufacturing boilers, you may need help to lift the blast door as it is heavier, so always work safely and be mindful of the weight of the door as we don't want you to get hurt. Using a pair of pliers, we're going to pull out the pins on either side of the door. Make sure you put the pins in a safe spot so that you don't lose them. Now that I have the pins removed, I'm going to pull up on the center bar here and lift this blast door. Since it is a smaller blast door, I can lift it by myself. I'm going to pull the two hinges off the center pin here, and I'm going to safely remove the blast door and set it against the wall out of the way. I'm going to lift it up. Now you can remove the blast door and put it against the wall. Now that the blast door is off the Sellers Manufacturing boiler, you can see this gasket here. This gasket is a rectangle that goes all the way around. This is a tadpole rope gasket. This gasket is secured with rivets and a metal strip on the inside. In order to remove this gasket, you need to drill out the rivets that are on each side of the gasket. You're going to remove this metal strip, you're going to remove the gasket, and then you're going to insert a new gasket, and you're going to start at the bottom here. You're going to work your way around, and then you're going to put the metal strip on top of the gasket and then insert a rivet so that the gasket is held. And you're going to rivet it as you go around, and then when you come down to the seam, you're going to want to make sure that the two ends touch, and you're going to cut it so that the ends are pushing against each other, as we always want a seal for the combustion gases for the blast door so that we don't have anything leaking into the room. Once you've cut and secured the gasket on all sides and the gasket surface is protruding above the metal, we are now ready to install the blast door back on the rear of the Sellers S-Series boiler. You're going to take the blast door, you're going to push it against the boiler, you're going to lift it and put the hinges back on the bar. Now that the bar is supporting the blast door, it is now held onto the rear of the boiler. You're going to take your pins, insert them into the holes on the blast door. You want to make sure that this rod is secure so that this blast door cannot fall off the boiler. Now that we've safely replaced the blast door on the back of this Sellers S-Series boiler, let's go around to the front door and I'll show you how to properly and safely open the door to replace the gasket. Now that we've come around to the front of the Sellers S-Series boiler, let me show you what you need to disconnect before you open the front door. So on the front of the boiler, we'll have a gas line. You need to disconnect the gas line before you open the door. You may have a regulator here and you may have a regulator vent that is also installed. You may need to disconnect the regulator vent if it is installed on the regulator. Before you disconnect the gas line on your boiler, you always want to make sure that your gas is isolated. You need to lock it out if that is required at your facility. Let's undo the union. You may have a flange if you have a larger gas line. We don't have a regulator on this boiler, so we have no other piping that we need to disconnect. Let's go over to the bolts that are securing the front door to the shell of the boiler. Now that we're on the side of this Sellers Manufacturing S-Series boiler, let me show you the bolts that secure the front of the door to the shell of the boiler. Here we have a bolt, it's on a hinge here, and we have thread and then a nut. We're going to undo the nut to where you can spin it by hand and where you can hinge the bolt out of the way from the clamp on the shell. On this small boiler, we only have two bolts, one here and one here at the base. You may, on larger boilers, have bolts on other side of the shell, so make sure you walk around the shell and make sure on the hinge side that you have no bolts. Now that I've swung both bolts out of the way and I've disconnected any gas lines or vent lines that are connected to the front of the door, we are now ready to open the front door of the Sellers Manufacturing S-Series boiler. Now that we have the front of the door open, you can inspect the burner nozzles, you can do any maintenance on the pilot runners, you can replace the gasket on the front of the door, and any other inspection that you need to on the tubes or inside the pressure vessel. I'm now going to show you how to properly close the front of your Sellers Manufacturing boiler. You're going to swing the boiler shut. Now to close the front of the door, you may need to loosen up the nuts on the bolts, as the door, especially if you replace the gasket, may be a little tight into getting it closed. But on this smaller boiler, I'm able to manipulate the front door pretty well. So I'm now going to pull the door until the bolt is now on the clamp on the shell. I'm going to tighten up the nut. Let's do the same one on the opposite bolt. We're going to tighten it up. And now we're going to take our wrench and we're going to evenly tighten both to draw the door close to the shell and tighten against the gasket. Now that I've tightened both bolts that hold the front door to the shell here, and this slide block is flush on the edge here, I know that the front door is in the proper position. I have successfully closed the front and rear door of the Sellers boiler. If you have any other questions, you can go to sellersmfg.com and go to the factory tab at the top, and there you can locate your factory rep who will be able to help you with any questions or part needs that you have. If you haven't already, hit the like button and hit the subscribe button to learn more about Sellers Manufacturing products.